Hello and welcome to this week's video, which is about the issue of Europe. And today in 2015 we are facing in Britain the question of a referendum on whether or not Britain should remain within the EU. And this situation is quite similar to what was going on 4 decades ago. In 1975 there was a referendum on Britain's membership of the EEC. So David, what has changed in the 4 decades? What are the similarities? What are the differences?
I mean, 1975 is quite similar in terms of there's a major issue around the renegotiation of Britain's relationship with the EEC as it was then, rather than the EU. So Wilson asks to have a mandate to renegotiate Britain's relationship with the EEC. So it's very similar to what Cameron was doing at the time.
And this was really because the Labour Party was split in the years prior to this, in the run up to the 1974 election, in a way that is similar to the way in which the Conservative Party has been divided over the last couple of decades, really.
Yeah. So I suppose a major difference in 1975 is that Labour is the more Eurosceptic of the parties and is more divided on the issue. Scotland as well is also quite different in that it's perhaps the most Eurosceptic part of the country at the time. The SNP actually supports leaving the EEC as it was.
Now, you've been looking through some of the documents in the National Archives surrounding this, and you found documents about the ways in which the civil service were preparing for the eventuality of an exit. They had to have a plan in case, in fact, the voters. In fact, the voters went very, very heavily in favour of staying in the EEC, but of course the reverse could have been the case. So, how are they preparing? What sense do you get about the way in which the civil servants and indeed the politicians felt about this at the time?
No, I think in 1975 there's a great deal of anxiety over this issue, particularly as Britain had only just entered the EEC a couple of years before. Much like today, this is a time of great economic uncertainty and world economic crisis. So what we see in 1975 is a lot of debates amongst various key departments such as the Treasury and Cabinet Office, looking at the economic costs of leaving, but also the practicalities. And there's no precedent for a member state actually leaving the EEC at this time. So.
And I mean, it's worth emphasising, of course, that Britain had only joined the EEC in 1973, so there'd been one enormous set of preparation and upheaval.
Yes.
And now the civil servants are being told to prepare for sort of undoing it all, basically going into reverse. You may think that perhaps the civil servants might well have wanted a quiet life and hope that Britain would stay in.
Yeah. So there's a huge number of debates and issues about sovereignty. At this time, there's quite a lot of differences from today in terms of relationships with the Commonwealth are very much a key issue, and one which Wilson talks about a lot in terms of the renegotiation issue. Interestingly, in 1975 there's very little discussion about immigration, because Britain is one of the West European economies which is struggling the most at this time.
Yes, and of course there simply wasn't on the table at that point the question of free movement of labour within Europe, which is something which comes about as a result of the changes that were implemented in 1992. So we are looking at a different environment. But I suppose just finally, how did Britain and its government relate to Brussels at this time? How do Whitehall and Brussels actually interact? Because again, this is a sort of a major change in the way in which Britain has conducted its external relations, and there's quite an interesting passage in the diaries of Nicholas Henderson, who was ambassador in Paris for part of the 1970s, where he says, well, it's actually the role of the ambassador became downgraded during that period because ministers were suddenly talking directly to their European counterparts rather than using the ambassador as an intermediary.
Yeah, certainly. So you're getting the rise of a large European civil service effectively in Brussels and Strasbourg, but at the same time the bureaucracy of Europe is nothing like as large in the 1970s as it is after the Single European Act in the mid-1980s. So a lot of parallels but a lot of differences as well, and I think it'll be a fascinating discussion of this issue.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.